Imagine being 12 years old and the youngest child in a large family with a very strange history. As Roman learns more about his family, he discovers mysteries, magic, time travel, and did I mention the toe beast? Well, ahead I'll talk with Aaron Starmer about his middle grade novel, You Are Now Old Enough to Hear This. Hi, I'm Dan Skinner, and welcome to the Kids Bookshelf. Aaron Starmer is the best-selling author of more than a dozen novels for middle grade and young adult readers, including Night Swimming, A Million Views, and Spontaneous, which was made into a film by Paramount Pictures. He's also the author of the Locker 37 series, among other novels. Aaron, welcome to the Kids Bookshelf.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me, Dan.
Well, this is another in your many books that you've written for middle grade readers. Was there a particular inspiration for this latest book?
Well, I mean, like all books, there's lots of inspirations, but the most obvious one being it's a family book. It's about a extended family, and the main character Roman is the youngest in an extended family, and I was in that position growing up. I always lose count, but 15 or 16 cousins on my mom's side, and I was the youngest of them. So those feelings of being the youngest and feeling like there's all sorts of family secrets and family stories that you don't know, and everyone else might know. And I use that as inspiration for obviously an unconventional tale of discovering your family secrets. But I wanted the emotional core to be really true to my experience and what I think is probably a lot of people's experiences.
Roman is 12 years old, so for what age group is the book intended?
About that age, 9 to 12 is, solidly middle grade, maybe on the upper edge of middle grade, because there's some dark content, but nothing too scary or too controversial. It's just there's an overwhelming feeling of mystery throughout the book that I think will intrigue that age group. For younger, they might not be as into it, and I hope older people like it as well, though.
So tell us about the plot. What's the story that readers are going to find here?
Well, so the basic setup is Roman has a grandfather, Grandpa Henry, and he passes away very early in the book. That's not a spoiler. I think it happens in chapter 1, and Roman is tasked with cleaning out his attic because they're going to have to sell the house. Well, he's cleaning the whole house, but in the attic is where he finds some interesting things, including a jar of formaldehyde and a book, a handwritten book about a girl and a pack of dogs in a small town in America. And he starts to link these to these tales that his grandfather used to tell, specifically about something called the toe beast. It's a sort of a family lore that Grandpa used to tell, and Grandpa only had 9 toes. And so Roman always knew there was some sort of link between the toe beast and Grandpa's story, but he was always too scared to hear it when Grandpa Henry would tell it. So it's all about Roman finding these things and putting together all these family stories and finding out how his family came to be and how everything is linked and what his future is and his destiny in a way.
So, as you pointed out, this is a story you think a lot of people will identify with Roman. As he's getting older, he's learning about these family secrets, which I think a lot of us all go through to find out things about our family we didn't know or just weren't aware of when we were younger. But in Roman's case, his family has a very interesting history.
Yeah. And, that's partly just me as a writer. I like to explore sort of weird plot twists and unconventional styles. But as I said, I wanted the emotional core to be really realistic, and I wanted it to feel realistic. So magic leaks in. There's some other, sort of things that I won't give away, but, it fits in a lot of genres, I will say, fantasy, sci-fi, but also just a middle grade family story. I think there's a great tradition of middle grade stories about discovering your family history. And I think, at that age, 12, is when a lot of us do discover a lot about our family history because we're ready to sort of confront those more adult themes and those more adult stories, and we're ready to grow up.
So let's talk about more of those themes in the book. One of them is learning about your heritage as a family member. And also, as you mentioned earlier, being the youngest child, he has to constantly deal with older siblings. And so tell us a little bit more about those themes you wanted to bring out in this book.
Well, it's a feeling when you're in that youngest position, you have access to things that maybe the oldest generation didn't, because there's lots of older kids around that are exposing you to, whether it's movies that you're not quite ready to see, or stories you're not quite ready to hear. But then on the other hand, with the parents and the grandparents, you might feel not necessarily neglected, but they've gone through this so many times before with the older kids, that you have a little more free reign, a little more freedom, and you're not watched over in the same way that some of the older ones might be. And I think that's a story that lends the story a lot of opportunity for growth for Roman, in terms of he's going to drive his own destiny here, and he's going to discover these things, and there aren't going to be the traditional obstacles of a helicopter parents in the way. He's gonna do this himself, and it's about finding that bravery within yourself to confront these things.
So Roman is figuring out who he is. He learns about his family history, but as he works on becoming an individual, coming into his own, he has to discover, am I really sort of bound by my family's past, or am I going to chart my own way going forward?
Right. Yeah. And, there's a lot in the story about, generational trauma, but also, generational strength. What Roman discovers about his family is the older generations have gone through a lot, and they've gotten stronger from it. And that can be a scary thing when you first confront those stories, but it also can be an encouraging thing, because it shows within your family heritage there are survivors. There are people that have confronted some really, in this case, some very strange things, but some very scary things, and that's where Roman, at the start, he's scared a lot, and it's about Roman confronting those fears.
I'm wondering if you could tell us, without getting into spoiler territory, a little bit more about how you've constructed this book, because there are different storylines going on that seem to be unrelated at first, but you have to read the book to find out how they're all connected. Tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so I always wanted to do it in sections, so it's in 4 sections, and they're told in different. Or actually, it's in 5 or 6 sections, but two of the sections are very short. But the main sections are told from slightly different perspectives. One of them is in first person, one of them is in third person. One of them uses the tense we, because it's a collective story. And I wanted it to be something that would constantly surprise a young reader, because you're stepping into different voices and different time periods. But also, I wanted certain stories to feel like this is a tale you're being told, and then others are, you're right in the middle of this. You are Roman right now. You are confronting this. So I had that structure from the beginning, and I also had a lot of the tales, specifically the tale of the girl and their dogs. Was one of the first things I wrote with this book, because I wanted this to be a collection of stories in a way, not a short story collection, but I created it as a unique way to position in all these different stories. So his mom tells a story, his grandparents each tell stories, various cousins and his brother have moments when they tell stories. And so it's still Roman's tale, but it's him collecting all these tales that are told from different perspectives.
There is a question I like to ask authors of fiction, and it's this. If you could spend a day in real life with one of the characters from this novel, who would it be and why?
That's a good one. I think I would want to spend it with Grandpa Henry because, the story ultimately it comes back to him, it comes back to his generation. And a big part of this inspiration for this also came from I have children that are I've got a 13-year-old at home who's, approximately Roman's age, and thinking about her relationship with her grandparents and sort of these, you know, how these relationships between kids and their grandparents are different than kids and their parents. And their grandparents can often share things that their parents can't necessarily share. I didn't necessarily have that relationship with my grandparents, and maybe I'm a little jealous that my kids get that relationship, but that's more of a generational thing. And also, my grandparents were much older when I was young, so yeah, I would love to have that sort of relationship with an older grandparent that's telling me stories and giving me their trust, and is treating me in a both a respectful way, but a mentor as well.
We've talked about some of the themes in this book. Besides an engaging read, what do you hope kids will continue to think about after they're finished with the novel?
Obviously all these themes that we brought up, but I also want them to think about what a novel can be I wanted to challenge young readers, as I said, by changing the perspectives and changing the tense and, hopefully surprising both readers young and old that a novel for young readers doesn't have to be, you know, uh, by the book. In other words, you can take risks and you can experiment with style. And at the same time, be fun. That doesn't mean that, I don't think this is an overly artsy book where kids are going to get bored. I think there are a lot of cliffhangers and a lot of fun genre elements to it. But I just wanted to go about it in a unique way.
You've written a lot of middle grade novels. What do you enjoy about writing for this age group?
Um, I guess just sort of recapturing that moment in my life and sort of revisiting those emotions from a distance, because when you're in them, they're big and you know everything is intense when you're young. Every little feeling, every friendship is intense, and that changes as you get older. But you can revisit it through reading fiction, through experiencing art, but also obviously through writing it. And it's so many of those feelings are much more vivid in my imagination and my memory than, say, ones from my 20s or 30s. And so I really love to revisit that time.
So what's next for you?
Well, I've got a book in 2027 called The Swans, which is a young adult book. I call it a thriller comedy about a teenager whose town is visited by some true crime podcasters who are coming to investigate a series of swan murders in the town, and how this affects this young teenager. So that will come out next year, and then I'm working on a new book that's a kind of secret, but it will be a middle grade book, which has a little more action and espionage, but also has a good emotional core as well, hopefully.
Well, this current middle grade novel is You Are Now Old Enough to Hear This by Aaron Starmer. Aaron, thank you for talking with me today.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Thank you, Dan.
If you'd like to purchase You Are Now Old Enough to Hear This, I've placed a link for you in the description below. If you enjoyed this conversation, please subscribe, like, and click on the bell so you know when I post new interviews. Meanwhile, here are 2 more books you might find interesting. Well, thank you for watching this edition of the Kids Bookshelf. I'm Dan Skinner. Until next time, keep sharing the gift of reading.